I take this as an opportune time to discuss the status of rule of law in the country in the context of the Adani crisis. We know that after the release of the Hindenburg report, many opposition parties have been asking the governments about its role in the whole scenario where Adani actually rose to power steeply and also fell steeply. So, do you think it is a symptom of a deeper political problem? And also, if let's say there were certain malpractices, what were the credit rating agencies doing till now?
Vritti, I think this is a very instructive moment. Politics apart, polarization apart, as a society, we must honestly introspect whether you support the ruling party at the national level or not. It's immaterial. The country's future must be safeguarded. There are two elements, as you said. One is the regulatory agencies. What have they done? Why have they woken up now? Do they require a small little company with half a dozen workers called Hindenburg to tell us what they have come out with? There's nothing earth-shaking they come out with. They came up with the data which is in the public domain. They just put it together. Whether it's the RBI which has belatedly asked the banks to tell the the Reserve Bank what is the debt situation, or the regulatory agencies like SEBI, what are they doing? Why are they sleeping at the wheel? And if there is a perception that they have been following the diktats of those in power, it's not a good thing for the country or the credibility of these institutions. It's in the interest of the government and these institutions, and of course the economy of the country, to strengthen them. I'm absolutely certain that the government of India is committed to economic growth, rapid economic growth. That is self-evident. But rapid economic growth does not happen merely because of your intentions or even investments. It's the climate of trust and confidence in the capital market, in the investment climate, in the credit market that you engender. If that fails, if there's a perception that favorites will rule the roost, then certainly you will not be able to attract investment. You may think everything is secret. Forget the morality part of it, legality part of it. From a pragmatic point of view, you may think you have secret deals. But if the world perceives that, why will the investor come here? If they think you are playing favorites and your economic fortunes depend on the political patronage, people with investable surpluses have better options. They don't have to come here. So it is in the interest of the country. Forget the morality part of it. Forget the corruption part of it. For economic growth project, it's important to engender confidence in these institutions and ensure that there is fair competition in a transparent manner so that everybody understands. There's a second element, the political part of it that you mentioned. If there is crony capitalism, and I think there is some evidence to suggest that, people of Andhra Pradesh have some familiarity. Some well-known companies know a Gangavaram port, Krishnapatnam port, or the Bombay airport, which was developed by GVK from Andhra Pradesh. They've all now gone into Adani's hands. I'm sure some of it is legitimate commercial decision, but there's also a very strong suspicion in the knowledgeable circles that there was a lot of arm twisting using the regulatory agencies, and therefore for the investor, original investor or developer, it's not worthwhile to fight the might of the government, and therefore they agreed to the transfer of assets. That's not market economy. That's not true competition or choice. That's not in the long-term interest of the country. But why did that happen? If indeed that happened, why did that happen? I don't think there is corruption as a motive. I think it is because of the political economy. Look at Bofors scam. What happened in Bofors? Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, if I read the situation correctly, he actually wanted to reduce the dependence of the ruling party on money bags. He felt it's infra-dig, it's undignified for a government, the mighty government, to go and beg entrepreneurs to give money and then do favors to them. Therefore, they thought they came out with a clever formula. Anyway, defense purchase is there. As long as the quality of the purchase is not compromised, national security interests are not compromised, if there is a padding of the cost, and if that additional price goes for the political funding in some direct, complicated form, that's a relatively small price for the country, is the decision they made. I disagree with that, but let's assume that's right. But see what happened as a consequence. A government was in turmoil. a nation was dishonored in the global committee, and there was a political strife from which Congress party could never really recover. And all kinds of public procurement were under suspicion. And I'm told for years, if not decades, defense procurement was halted because nobody was willing to make decisions for fear of future inquiries and so on and so forth. So ultimately, we endanger the national security. Similarly, today, I think a bargain was made that instead of going to 25 people and asking for money, you will strengthen and support somebody who you believe will deliver infrastructure. After all, who doesn't want national highways and ports and all kinds of infrastructure in the country? And Adanis are into many of those things which are necessary for the country. Therefore, it's easy for those in power to convince themselves it's in the interest of the country. Therefore, the deal appears to be that we will help you. Now, when we need funding, you take care of our political needs. It's a very sad bargain. It appears to be a nice bargain to start with. Just like Bofors appeared to be a nice bargain. But ultimately it's a sad bargain because it now jeopardizes the whole enterprise, a big enterprise. And while we will recover, India is a big enough market and we have enough institutional strength to recover from this, but it certainly set us back quite a bit. And it also has the potential to undermine the stability and the credibility of the government. When the government is embarked on the growth project, now you may disagree about the growth strategy, but at a time when most of the large economies in the world are reeling under potential or real recession and high inflation and wondering what to do about the growth problems they're encountering, India is reasonably well placed with a moderately high growth. We have a long way to go. Let's not rest on our laurels, but at least it's a reasonable position. And if we do the right things on a sustained basis, there is a realistic prospect of a moderately high growth rate for the next 15, 20 years, which India desperately needs. Now, in order for that to happen, you have to set right our institutions of rule of law. But in order for that to happen, you must be able to come away from the temptation to use the power of law for political gain, for fundraising. That means you must also look at the political reform. In Telangana, recently there was a by-election. The total expenditure incurred by the three major party candidates, in fact, two candidates primarily, for a state assembly election in a small state, an election which has no consequence in terms of outcome. It doesn't matter who is elected. It does not change policy. It does not change government. The expenditure incurred cumulatively by the parties was estimated to be about 400 crore rupees. That is much, much more than the total expenditure incurred in Britain for the whole parliamentary election in 2019 by the major parties and all their candidates across the country. It's an extraordinary statement I'm making. A country whose total GDP, though the country itself is small, is equal to roughly India's GDP today. The total parliament national election in a unitary system, the election cost for the parties and candidates is less than one assembly segment in one small state in India. How absurd and insane the situation is. The political system must respond. The Prime Minister must respond. The Prime Minister was elected by the people in order to transform our politics and our economy. Good that some efforts are made to improve the economy. We appreciate that, we welcome it. We appreciate the fiscal discipline. We appreciate the restraint shown in public expenditure, the frugality. We appreciate the investment in long-term infrastructure for economic growth. We appreciate the accent on manufacturing and job creation and investments. All these are necessary and more is necessary. But without addressing the political challenge of illegitimate cost in elections and astronomical cost in elections and creating a mechanism for legitimate funding as well as eliminating the need for illegitimate funding, you cannot come out of this morass no matter what you say. You must alter the incentives. That means electoral reform. And at least now we must take advantage of this as an opportunity. This crisis is an opportunity for the country. You know, Tehelka scam, in 2003 or thereabout, about exactly 20 years ago, that was used as an opportunity by both the major parties, Congress and BJP, BJP then in power with NDA, and Congress in opposition by both the major parties to come together and enact a sensible law for political funding. At least for honest politics, there was an honest window for political funding with incentives for the donors. Now is the time to look at this and honestly acknowledge the problem of political funding and the problem of vote buying, profligate expenditure in elections, and illegitimate expenditure in elections. And therefore, even if you don't do it today, start the process of building a consensus across the country, generating a debate. What is the best and most sensible way of finding an electoral mechanism, electoral system that eliminates the need for this funding without unnecessarily jeopardizing the future, ensuring political stability and economic security in the country? That is hallmark of good leadership. I hope we'll go beyond politics. I hope we go beyond polarization, beyond who is right and who is wrong. Pointing fingers is no use now. We must come out of this, and I'm sure we'll come out of it. Indian economy has enough strength. But more important, we must prevent in future any such occurrence. Therefore, the regulatory agencies must act strongly, independently, impartially. But most of all, we must look at the political economy of it all, electoral funding, and the compulsions of it, whoever is in power, and therefore create a system where that kind of a requirement is no longer there. It's long overdue.
Thank you so much for giving an objective assessment of the whole scenario, sir. Thank you so much.